and then that way it will be accessible later. Either we'll post the recording if it's helpful, or we'll at least definitely have a outline on the website, which is the outline I'm going to go over. But I can be heard okay, right?
Yes, and for the we have a question from the Gas Depot Oil Company about do you have closed captioning? If you look, now that we're recording, it is actually transcribing. So we do have that functionality going.
Okay, I'll go over this outline of the auction. I'm going to start from the very beginning to the very end, and then afterwards we'll open it up to questions. So this will take me a moment. All right. The auction will begin. The auction will be Thursday, April 7th, 2022 at 10 a.m. at the Indiana Government Center South Building, first floor in the auditorium. That's here at 302 West Washington Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46204. This will be an in-person auction only, so everyone will need to show up for the auction who wants to participate. For pre-bid applications, they'll be due no later than Thursday, March 24th, 2022. Any pre-bid applications received after that date will not be accepted unless they have a March 24th, 2022 postmark date on the envelope. In-person submission of pre-bid applications at the Indiana Alcohol and Tobacco Commission is the most assured way to confirm that they have been completed properly and accepted. Note, pre-bid applications will only be for bidding within a specific permit type and jurisdiction. Submitting pre-bid applications for a permit type and jurisdiction will automatically enter you in all of the auctions for that specific permit type and jurisdiction. An example, in Indianapolis, there's 60 210 permits, 60 beer, wine, and liquor restaurant 210 permits. If you submitted a pre-bid application for listing any of those numbers in that, you'd still automatically be entered in all of those. Let's see, you'd still automatically be entered in all of those for the amount of pre-bid applications you submit. So if you submitted, there's an example on the website, but if you submitted 5 pre-bid applications for that permit type and jurisdiction, that's the maximum amount of that you could win, the number of pre-bid applications you submit. So if you submit 1 pre-bid application for that permit type and jurisdiction, then that would be the maximum you could win on that, since that's all you had submitted. And then you still have to submit your separate pre-bid applications for other permit types and jurisdictions. We can take other questions about that later. A successful bidder's application must match the name on the pre-bid application. We may have more, Clark may go over on that later on. After submitting a pre-bid application, the bidder will receive these 3 items by email if available, or if they don't list an email on the pre-bid application, then by mail. They'll receive a pre-approved bidder letter that's going to confirm that they are in the auction for the types that they're submitting for. A bidder information letter, which is going to just describe some of this detail about the auction. And then they'll also receive a blank non-collusion affidavit to fill out and bring to the auction. A successful bidder at the auction will only be able to have their security deposit refunded if their application is later denied. If a successful bidder fails to submit an application within 30 days after the auction, the security deposit will not be refunded. Auction procedures. The auction will begin at 10 a.m., but we'll open the doors at 8:30 a.m. So anyone can begin arriving at 8:30. It probably would be a good idea to arrive early in order to get everything done to be prepared for the auction. Bidders will arrive at the Government Center South Building and enter from the public entrance on the east side of the building, which faces the Capitol building. The auditorium is about halfway down the distance of the building. When you enter through the public entrance, it's about halfway down the distance of the building, where it will then open up into a large lobby to your right. The auditorium entrance is then in that lobby. Bidders will enter the auditorium and go to the registration table inside the entrance of the room. They should state which bidder they are and then submit their non-collusion affidavit. They will be handed these two items. They'll be handed bidder paddles for each permit type and jurisdiction that they will be participating in. Typically, you would just have something like a number on your bidder paddle, but for this auction, because of the amount, to help keep it organized, for each pre-bid application you submit, you'll receive a bidder paddle for that pre-bid application. So if you submit, say, 5 pre-bid applications for Indianapolis 210s, that's going to show how many you can do. Once you're out, then you're out. So that'll help keep that organized. And then you'll also receive a bidder list. The auction will proceed in the order as advertised, which is on the website. That order is alphabetical by county, and then it is sorted further alphabetically by jurisdiction. The order then within each of those jurisdictions on the list goes in this order: beer, wine, and liquor package store, then beer, wine, and liquor restaurant, then beer and wine restaurant, then beer restaurant, then beer, wine, and liquor drugstore, and finally beer and wine grocery store. When a person is a successful bidder, ATC employees will come to take the paddle of the successful bidder for the permit they won. So you're going to have those that correspond to all your pre-bids. So if you win, we'll come, we'll grab it, and then that's going to tell us that you won, and then we'll also be recording in other ways. Once they are done bidding on permits, they can go to the back of the room to complete their purchase agreement. So they don't have to wait till the end of the auction. If they're just done, then they can just go to the back of the room and complete that. They'll also be handed a blank alcohol permit application, and then I'm also going to include in there a checklist of items to help people who wouldn't be as familiar make sure that they have everything ready properly. If a bidder, as I mentioned, if a bidder no longer has any paddles for a permit type and jurisdiction, that's going to indicate that they're unable to further bid on any permits within that permit type and jurisdiction. The auction will take an extended period of time, so you'll want to be prepared to be present for the period, for that period of time. You've got the order, if that helps judge as it goes along, but you'll want to make sure that you are available. It will take an extended period of time. After the auction, some detail after the auction, unsuccessful bidders, assuming that this is possible logistically, depending upon how many we have, unsuccessful bidders can go to the back of the room to claim their pre-bid applications. So if they didn't win, they can go to the back of the room and they can get their pre-bid application back. They've got to hold on to those bidder paddles for pre-bid applications that they're seeking to obtain back, because they'll go to the back of the room and then that's going to be what they use to exchange to get that pre-bid back. So they'll give us the bidder paddle for that, and then we'll give them the pre-bid applications for those. If for some reason they didn't hold on to them, they lost them, something like that, then we'll just mail any of those pre-bid applications back later. Some information on successful bidders submitting applications. Successful bidders must complete an application and turn it in with the winning bidding amount no later than it's 30 days, which it falls on a weekend. So then it would be, I believe, May 9th, 2022. That would be the deadline for successful bidders to submit their applications. If the application is missing required items and then it has to be returned, they may potentially risk losing the winning bid if their application is not substantially complete. For instance, if they turn their application, if they just don't turn in what's called like the county verification form, they don't turn in floor plans, they don't turn in some other required item, criminal conviction information, if that applies, that type of stuff, then that they could risk that getting returned and losing that. So they're going to want to make sure that it's complete, and it would probably be helpful for anybody if they wanted to hire a preparer that could assist them in making sure that's done properly. If a successful bidder fails to submit their substantially complete application with winning bid amount by May 9th, 2022, then they'll be the backup bidder, the second person on that. The backup bidder will have an opportunity to submit their substantially complete application with their backup bid by no later than Monday, June 6, 2022, which is 60 days after the auction. So that concludes my outline of everything. So Clark, anything else you want to say before we go to questions?
Sure. And yeah, we did receive a few questions submitted that were submitted before, so maybe we'll start by going through those and give others the chance to place further questions in the chat. Before I get to the questions, I want to highlight one tweak. So when it comes to the auction, we have our winner and our backup bidder. So if the winner does not end up applying, that backup bidder is able to then apply for the permit. And that the way we're handling the auction of having people submit for a particular permit type in a jurisdiction rather than a specific permit. So let's say in Marion County, if someone submits 5 pre-bids on the 6210s and they end up winning 5 at the auction, but then they also are backup bidders on 3, they are going to lose those backup bids. So they're not able to walk away with a total of 8 permits. You're only able to walk away with the number of permits on which you submitted pre-bids. So just wanted to make sure we're all solid on that. And then we did get a couple questions. The first has to do just with the size of the auction and how much time it'll take. And one thing I'll first point out is we have hired a professional auctioneer this time around, so it's going to be run by a professional outfit that will, I think, speed things up. We also don't believe that we're going to get contested bids on every single permit, and to the extent that we have permits that have one or no bidders, we're not going to call those. So the people who submitted pre-bids, if they don't have any competition, we're just going to allow them to apply. They just have to show up at the auction. And then Jeff, could you talk a little bit about from a technical standpoint, how do we fill out the application if we want only 1 or 2 permits when multiple permits are available? As an example, if we are bidding on Indianapolis permits, we want 2. We know we have to tender 2 checks. Do we just write MN01 on the application? And does that qualify us to bid on both?
Right. So I've got a little bit of information on the auction page on the website about that. So it's going to say on there, let's see. So submitting a pre-bid application for a permit type and jurisdiction will automatically enter you in all of the auctions of that specific permit type and jurisdiction. So again, like Marion County 210 or Indianapolis 210s, if you submit whatever number you write MN01, you write MN10, anything, or you put the whole range, MN01 to MN60, we'll still punch you in that for that amount of pre-bids that you submitted. So 1's going to get 1 opportunity to win, 2, and so on. So it doesn't matter. You can write any of them, or you can just write the whole range for that permit type and jurisdiction.
Okay. And then there's a question about releasing the list of qualifying bidders, and we would like to do that. We plan to do that. I would encourage people, if they want to have a list be issued in a timely fashion, to get your pre-bids in as soon as possible. So, a lot of times we see people waiting till the last minute to get their pre-bids in, and then it takes us obviously time to create that list. So I would encourage bidders to get their pre-bids in as soon as possible to facilitate the creation of that list and the dissemination of it. And then there was a question on I'll just read from it. We have several clients that hold each permit in a distinct entity. We want to make sure they can do the bidding in the name of the corporate holding company. And then if they're the winning bidder, they can open up the application for the entity to actually hold the permit. So the way, we do have to obviously watch against speculation. We will allow us a permittee or a bidder to file a transfer application at the same time as the application for the permit following, if they're the winning bidder. But the transferee has to have this, for a corporation, has to have the same corporate ownership as that actual bidder. So then, because we're not going to do the speculation scrutiny.
Do you want to mention at all what speculation is, Clark, or do you want me to say anything about it? Just so anyone knows.
Yes, go for it.
So what Clark is referring to there is that if you win a permit, and then let's say you put that permit in escrow, which is the non-operational status where you're not open, then you're not allowed to sell that permit for a profit. So you can't go to the auction, win a permit, not use it, and then sell it for a profit. So what that is saying is you have to use a permit, open up a place and actively use the permit. And then at some point in the future, if you closed or you didn't need it any longer, you could sell it. But that's what Clark is referring to when he's saying avoiding speculation by submitting a application with a transfer simultaneously to a different entity. So,
right.
Thanks. Any more questions outside the chat, Clark?
No, that was it from
Okay.
those. We can start working through the questions we got in the chat. The first one is, can I have someone else drop off my pre-bid application?
So as long as it's completed, as long as you're confident that it was completed properly, then sure, anyone could drop it off. But if they get here, something's wrong with it, they said they don't have any other permits and they really do, and they didn't disclose them, or they came with a money order instead of a certified or cashier's check, or they came with cash, or they wanted to pay by credit. If there's any of those issues, then they would have a problem turning it in. So because they would not be the applicant and they would be able to amend nothing. So they'll want to make sure that that's fully completed properly. And if they're really not sure, then it would be a good idea to probably have the owner or somebody with a power of attorney turn it in.
Great. Next one. So can I find the successful bidder checklist online, or can that be shared? I don't know if we typically share the successful bidder checklist. You're saying?
So there's two lists. So before the auction, there's going to be the bidder list, which we're trying to get up as quick as we can.
Yeah.
And then after the auction, there'll be the auction results, which is what they're saying there, the successful bidder list. So the auction results would be posted.
Okay, so we do
sometime after that.
No, Jeff, you mentioned a checklist that you'll kind of give to the successful bidder to know what they need to complete the application once they've won the bid. So the question is, can you share that checklist ahead of time, or do you have to win the successful bid before you can, start looking at what you need to get together?
Oh, well, sure, we could put something online. So the application's pretty much going to say all these things anyway, but sometimes it's helpful just to have a separate checklist. So I just have kind of a checklist I usually email people, or if they have a question, which says you need an application, county verification form, property tax, floor plans, the fee, maybe certificate of existence. Yeah, we can post that on the website ahead of time if it's helpful. Yeah, we'll do that.
And I think we already covered this one. If you win a bid, can it be transferred to another entity under the same owner? And that's what I was talking about. Yes, if the corporate ownership is the same, we're going to allow you to file a transfer at the same time as the winning bid application. Does the pre-bid fee go towards the application fee for the successful bid? Jeff?
No. So no. So if you whatever you submit, that security deposit does not go towards the amount that your winning bid. So if you're applying to be if you submit a pre-bid application for a beer, wine, and liquor restaurant and it has $1,000 security deposit, that's going to be by cashier's check or money or cashier's check or certified check. And then if let's say you win the permit for 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, whatever you win it for, then that amount would just be entirely separate and unrelated to the security deposit.
The next question is, what will bids start at? And do you want to handle that?
The minimum bid is the same as the security deposit. So it's whatever the annual fee for the permit is. So same example, if it's a beer, wine, liquor restaurant, the security deposit's $1,000, but then also that winning or that starting bid is the same thing, is $1,000.
Right. And then does the person who filled out the pre-bid application have to be present at the auction, or can someone else represent them and bid?
So on that question, it has to be somebody who's one in the ownership. So there's two things. One, XYZ Company Inc., whatever it is. I mean, one owner could fill that pre-bid application out, and another owner could show up if they're legitimately an owner of that company. But if it's someone who's not an owner of that company, let's say they have a preparer or just anybody else who's going to be there for them, they would need to make sure that that person filled out a ATC power of attorney form, and they need to bring that with them to the auction. If they don't bring it with them to the auction, then that person would not be able to bid for them.
Right. So
and that's on our website, on our forms page.
Yes. So need to have a power of attorney on file or on their person at the auction. Do you have to have proof of funds before bidding? I mean, I guess the pre-bid is sort of our, proof of, financial assurance. And that's why we ask for those pre-bids in the form of cashier's checks. What's the other cashier's checks, or what's the other one?
Certified check or cashier's check only for the pre-bid.
Right.
But then for like the winning amount, you wouldn't have to have anything necessarily at the auction about, saying like certifying like those funds immediately. But if you don't turn your application in within 30 days with that fee, whatever that fee is that you win it for, then you'd lose that. Even though you had the winning bid, you would lose it.
Yeah, you lose the right to purchase the permit. And then, can you explain what you mean by filing a transfer at the same time as the application for the permit if the entity hasn't been set up at the time of the auction? Are you saying you have to file 2 complete applications? The local board will have to approve the original application to the holding company, and then we'll have to, and the answer to that question, Jeff, is yes. You will have to fill out both applications. If that's a concern, then, obviously the entities could fill out pre-bids for each individual corporation. But that just seems to be on our end the cleanest way to handle those issues. That's all the questions we have in the chat. Does anyone else have anything?
If you want to either type a question, or if there's a little raise hand icon too next to the conversation icon at the top, you could click that if you wanted to.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff and Clark, this is Jeff McKean. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought this might be easier. I can't type that fast. So, yeah. So I was just trying to get clarification on the situation where you've got the holding company, or they're not sure if they're going to be the winning bidders. Let me ask this, if this would help. I've always been afraid to do this in the past, but could you submit, because the fear is, if somebody's bidding on 5 permits that they don't know they're going to get, they don't necessarily want to go out and set up 5 separate entities with the Secretary of State. And then if they're not the winning bidder, then they have to close out all those entities. Could you apply in the name of an entity that hadn't been set up yet? And then if you're the winning bidder in the 30 days before your application's due, could you then go to the Secretary of State and set that entity up? to avoid having to transfer it out of the holding company and into the individual location entity. You follow what I mean?
I mean, I follow. Legally, I don't know how an entity that hasn't been set up can bid on something,
I would agree.
because then they're not, you know, a
Doesn't have any ownership.
no
I know in the past what we've done in these situations, if there was commonality of ownership, I can think of two situations I've done it before where, you know, it's not somebody trying to speculate or game the system, but if there's commonality between the holding company and then the individual location entity that they ultimately set up, we were allowed to show that commonality, and at the time we submitted our application, just do it in the new entity. But you're saying that's not going to be accepted?
I wouldn't, I mean, I wouldn't think so. And I can get back with you on that. And if anyone else needs that information, feel free to email me at ckirkman1@atc.in.gov. I mean, you know, from the standpoint of setting up corporate entities and having to close them out, I mean, that's this auction is no different from any other one. Just because we're handling the pre-bids differently doesn't mean that there's, you know, corporations that might be set up to bid on an auction that then don't win their permit. Right?
Yeah, right. I guess what I was saying was, in the past, I think there had been accommodation that if it's commonality of ownership, they let us go ahead and file in the name of the new entity. But you and I can talk about that.
All right.
Yeah, we can get to that. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, does the winning bidder pay for the permit the day of the auction? If so, does there have to be a certified check? And no, you have 30 days to submit that. You have to file your application, and you submit the auction winning dollar amount with the application. So you have 30 days to do that.
And then when you submit the actual application, that application, like that winning amount fee, that doesn't have to be a certified check or cashier's check. That can just be anything we regularly accept. But then again, if you submitted anything, if the funds were, if it came back as non-sufficient funds, then the permit, would not be able to be issued. But, oh, here we go.
Looks like we got a raised hand here. See, we have Bart. Can you? Yeah, you can speak.
Hey, Clark, Jeff,
Yeah.
how are you gentlemen doing today?
Good.
All right.
Good. Hey, and sorry, I came in just a little bit late on this. I just want to try to confirm one thing. If I apply hypothetically for a 210 and I file $1,000 application fee, let's say the permit goes for 25 grand and I'm the successful winner. Does my $1,000 fee that I pay up front, does it offset that 25 grand and therefore I'd have to pay 24, or is it 25 on top of the original $1,000 bid?
The latter.
Yeah, it's not connected.
That's how
It's
it's
not
always been. Yeah.
Okay, so it's $1,000, successful bidder at 25. We got to pay the 25, and then what's that? And then the application fee for another $1,000, correct?
Well, yeah, the security deposit. I think when you say application fee, I assume you're meaning the security deposit that goes with the actual pre-bid. Yes or no?
Yeah, no. Well, the pre-bid application for 1,000. Then we win at 25. Let's just say hypothetically. But then when I file the application to put it into our name, go in front of local board and whatnot, I got to pay an additional 1,000. Is that correct?
No. So you have the security deposit, which is essentially that's like basically the application fee. So that's one thing, the security deposit. And then you have later, if you submit a winning application, then you have whatever amount that you want it for. But there's no there's no additional application after that. That's kind of what the security deposit takes care of.
Okay, I appreciate that. That's helpful. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep. It says, you mentioned floor plans. Do you need to have a location already approved, or can you put the license in escrow until you find a location?
So this is so in the example that I mentioned, where when I was listing off some items, that when I was listing those items, I was listing it as if you would have a location. So there's two paths to take. There's either one, you have a location, you submit that application, and you're either ready to go for the application, or at least your construction or something, but to whatever effect, the address. But then, in which case you would need all the regular attachments, which I can put that checklist on the website. But then the second scenario that happens, especially with auctions sometimes, is there is a way to submit what's called a pending location application. So if you do that, basically, you would only do that if you didn't have an address, you didn't know exactly what you were going to do with it yet, because you didn't want to like buy a building or rent a space or lease a space or something. Then in that situation, the address line on the application would just say location pending, and then you really wouldn't have any other attachments with it except for that's called the escrow request form to list the reasons why you need the permit to be held as non-operational. But so in that location pending situation, you would not need most of the attachments.
Yeah, so the short answer is no, you do not need to have a floor plan before you win a permit.
Yeah.
And then, do you have to have an annuity set up before you can bid? And I think the short answer to that one is no. You just, you need to have, either bid individually or as a corporation and pay your pre-bid fee, and that, and file the pre-bid application, and those are your requirements. And, be eligible to bid on the permit as the pre-bid application walks you through. Anything else? Okay, well, I hope that everyone on this presentation has found it helpful, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the permit auction on, we have one here. We have a restaurant 210-1 that does not include carryout. Could we bid on a 210 including it and transfer? I mean, you can always bid. Yeah, go for it.
So your question is, you have an underlying permit with a restaurant 210-1 permit, doesn't allow carryout, so you want to bid on a 210 because you apparently want the ability to have carryout. So the answer to that is yes, you could bid on that 210 permit, and then you could, if you win that, then you would have to do something with your 210-1. So you'd probably either put it in escrow. You would need to either put it in escrow, or you would need to relinquish it if you don't have any use for it. But if you put it in escrow, then yeah, you could transfer it later, assuming that it was actively used.
Right.
And do we want to mention too, Clark? We could potentially have another question and answer session too, if it's needed.
Yeah. If people, if we hear from people, we can always put something else together. We'll definitely put this one on our website. We're recording it, so we're hoping we'll at least post this, and then if we get further questions, we can address them as they come through.
Additional question.
And then we did just get another question now in our Teams chat. How long can a pending location / escrowed license be held in escrow?
So if you applied for a new permit and you needed either it had an address and it was not ready to open, or you just did location pending, in either one of those two cases, you could submit the escrow request form if you were not going to be ready to open to be operational. And then the initial period, if it's approved, you could get 2 years of escrow approval initially from the issue date. And then after that, there's up to 3 additional 1-year extensions of escrow for a total of 5 years in escrow. And that's if the commission approves it each time.
Right. And that 5-year deadline is a hard stop. We do not have discretion to extend it past the 5 years, but you can potentially keep your permit in escrow for up to 5 years without making it active.
And you still have to submit renewals each year too, by the way. Each year, if you do that, you still have to second, third, fourth year, et cetera. You'd still have to submit your renewals.
You just, yes, the second year, you don't have to go before the commission and ask. You don't have to do that until the third year.
Right.
Anything else? I know I already did my wrap-up speech once here. Well, anyway, well, again, I hope that everyone found this informative and will help to ensure that April 7th goes as smoothly as we can. I thank you so much for attending and taking the time, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks.